Okay, we have a period of questions and answers, discussion right now. So you have a choice, or you have three choices. One is just sit there quietly and don't ask anything. Choice number 2 is to ask out loud, and choice number 3 for the more shy members of the group to write their question down. So, would anybody like to ask straight away without writing things down? Yes.
How important do you think the environment is? Because here how important do you think the environment is for meditation? Because I think there's a lot of noise and machinery noise here, which is quite negative.
Yes. Basically, environment is something to take into account and to try to create the most conducive conditions that you can. But when you've got the most conducive conditions that you can, then to be at peace with that and not to make a problem out of it, because it's very easy to pick on the imperfect aspects of a situation and then overlook the more advantageous aspects. There's my teacher, Ajahn first went to England in the mid-70s, and at that time he'd accepted an invitation from a body called the English Sangha Trust, which was set up to support the creation of Thai forest tradition monasteries in England. And the monks who went initially were living in their property on Haverstock Hill in the middle of London until they could find a suitable property out in the countryside. So it's very difficult for the monks, after having lived in the forest, to be living in the middle of London. Fortunately, Haverstock Hill is only a 20-minute walk or so from Hampstead Heath, so they could go for a walk every day. But still, they felt very constricted. But this property was also directly opposite to a pub, and in the evening they would have like rock bands and all kinds of stuff. And so Ajahn Chah came to visit, and they had an evening meeting with chanting and meditation. And in the middle of the meditation, of course, the rock band started up. And so after this, somebody asked Ajahn Chah a similar question to you just asked me, and he said the sound of the music was very annoying to me during the meditation. And so Ajahn Chah, in his typical way, he said, it wasn't that the music or the sound annoyed you, you annoyed the sound. So you disturbed the sound. I mean, the sound is just the sound, but it's because your ear went out to the sound and made an issue out of it that it became a real obstacle. So that's not to say you don't give any importance to quiet because it's easier to meditate. But the fact remains, if you're living in a big city, then it's unlikely that you're going to have the same kind of quietness that you could get in a rural or in an area or in a forest. So first you have to do the best that you can. Of course, it helps to meditate really early in the morning before there's too much work going on, and your mind is also much fresher at that time. But in the end, there is a certain amount of freedom and sense of ease that comes when you do sit through disturbances and disturbing sounds after a while, and then after a while, yes, you can do that. I mean, it's not necessarily that you would prefer it not to be like that, but you can still maintain mindfulness when there are things which are, let's say, encouraging you to give attention to them rather than actually forcing you to give attention to them. And that does mean that you have increased confidence and an increased ability to develop particularly mindfulness techniques in your daily life when you're out in the city, when you're in the traffic or in your office or walking around and so on, and which is, a wonderful skill to be able to develop. So, and if somebody has only meditated in very kind of quiet, conducive conditions and they've never developed that ability, they can get really lost when they're suddenly in the city and so there's a silver lining to the cloud, if you like. But what's really important in meditation again is that it's not only the peaceful, mindful state that we're establishing as a goal, which is of value to meditation, but the effort to sustain your attention or to extend your attention span using the breath, for instance, by itself illuminates so many habitual habits of mind that you would normally not be conscious of, because it's just the way that you've always been. And in ordinary life, we can say it's like the background to our mental activity is so variegated and so complex that it's very hard to observe what's going on. When you have a meditation object, it's like this: you've got a blank screen behind you, and then the movement of the mind becomes that much more obvious to you. And so one of these habits of mind, which is called a hindrance or nivarana in the Buddhist technical term, is the mind which is grasping onto the unpleasant dimension or aspect of a situation and making a mountain out of a molehill, or really obsessing with that particular aspect and losing the sort of the big picture, as it were. So a common experience of people who attend meditation retreats for a number of days is these most irrational kinds of aversions that arise, particularly with the person who sits on either side of you, or the way that somebody walks into the meditation hall, the way someone sits, the way someone sneezes. If your mind tends to work that way, you can just get so worked up, and one part of you thinks it's ridiculous and it's funny, but another part you just can't help yourself, just getting so, why do they walk like that? Why do they do that? So and over a course of time, you just see there's this kind of floating aversion that's just looking for something or someone to settle upon, and observing that in yourself is a benefit of meditation. Although you might think that you're not peaceful, you're not benefited from it, but actually you have, because you begin to step back from and observe these negative tendencies of mind which are causing you unnecessary suffering in your daily life. So it's not like all or nothing. It's not like, if you're not peaceful and you're not having all these kind of beautiful experiences, a waste of time, because important part of it is you're learning about the way your mind works through applying a meditation technique. So, there are certain let's say in business, you go to business school and you learn theory, but it's only when you're actually in the business, in the office, in the field, that you actually learn what it's all about. And you can learn the theories, but it's when you're putting them into practice that you start to the real knowledge of what it's all about starts to arise. Anything else? Yeah.
It appears that when we grow up as a child, we need ego to kind of get a self-defining kind of image of ourselves.
Yes.
And also the negative side, where kind of we coming to the conclusion that we are a good person, where this, you limit yourself in who you think you are. But you come to a certain point where you're aware as an adult, and you kind of try to stay clear from the ego. You you're lessening your ego. What's the Buddhist teaching on and views on ego itself?
Yes, I prefer not to use that term itself, ego, in that it's part of a theoretical system devised by Sigmund Freud, which I don't think maps accurately onto the way the mind is. So we have a common way of talking about Eastern or most spiritual traditions is sort of eradicating the ego, getting rid of the ego, lessening the ego, all these kinds of things, and that's not really the way the Buddhists talk about it. There is a phrase called atta, or self, but in the technical term relating to the kind of attachment to self, it's not attachment to self, it's attachment to concept of self. Now, the whole idea is that there's nothing there in the first place, or it's not the way that it seems to be. So the classic illustration of this idea, and one that's present in Indian tradition and non-Buddhist tradition as well, is of the person walking home in the evening through the jungle, and then comes across this huge snake laid right across the path. And immediately all this kind of emotions arise of anger and fear, anxiety, so on. And then at that moment the moon comes out from behind the clouds, and he says it wasn't a snake at all, it's only a piece of rope. And so he laughs at himself probably and walks on home. So here the analogy is that the ego, so-called, or the sense of self, is like the snake. So what do you do about all this anger I have about the snake, or all this fear I have about the snake, and how do I deal with the anxiety about the snake? It's not that you have to deal with each thing individually, because that's not actually a snake, it's a piece of rope. Okay, so it's not actually an ego, it's not a thing, that there are processes going around. So the whole Buddhist vision of life is not of things acting and things like in Freud you have the ego, the id, the superego, and they're also sort of mechanistic kind of worldview influenced by 19th century understanding of things. What the Buddha is pointing to is of processes. So you have to see everything in terms of as processes. So if you want to talk about the ego, okay, but you have to see ego as a process. You don't want to talk about the soul, okay, you can talk about the soul, but you have to talk about the soul as a process, not as a thing. Okay? The mind, the heart, processes. So in other words, there are no nouns, there are only verbs, and all the things you thought were nouns, when you look at them, you can't find the noun, you can't find the thing there. All you can find is a process. And so moving away from conceiving of yourself and of other people and the world that you live in as this connection of sort of colliding things, and beginning to see the fluidity and the process nature of things is what affects a real revolution in your consciousness. And that's not based on this is the Buddhist philosophy. It's more like Buddha challenging you to look, okay, you think that there's an ego there. Where is it? Show it to me. What exactly does it consist of? What's its relationship, for instance, to the physical body? Where is it when you go to sleep? Yeah, for instance. So the Buddha is pointing out that we use language, and it's one of the reasons why the human race has been so successful, because of our use of language, our ability to manipulate concepts and to imagine things. But there's a downside, and that is that we take the conventions of language to refer to the way things are, and that's not necessarily the case. So we have, for instance, the word I refer to myself as I, and we say I this, I that, and I think, I felt, But when we look a little bit more closely, what does that word refer to in the real world of experience? Then it's not at all as straightforward as we'd assumed. For instance, when I say, I see you now, what I mean is that my eyes seeing this is a physical, there's data coming in through my eyes being processed by my brain. This is something going on physically. If I say I'm feeling happy to be here with you now, I'm speaking about a feeling arising. If I say I remember the last time I came to India, then that's a memory. If I say I'm of the opinion that, then that's a thought. So we're talking about all kinds of different things. We're talking about the body, we're talking about the sense, sometimes about the work of the senses, sometimes about feeling, sometimes about perception, memory, sometimes about thought, sometimes about imagination, all of which are in constantly changing processes. But just for the ease of communication, we refer to all of this complex thing as I. And so it's a social convention that we adopt in order to be able to communicate successfully. But our mistake is in assuming that social conventions map onto the way things are, like on one for one, and that's something that we're seeking to expose through meditation and to look very closely at what's going on. So, this idea, it's a common thing. Yes, you need a certain ego integrity before you can embark on spiritual life. This is commonly said. Certainly, if anyone is suffering from, a mental illness, perhaps schizophrenia, unipolar, all these kinds of disorders, then meditation is not going to be very good for many people. And if someone has in a monastery, someone has a nervous breakdown or something like that should happen. It does. I've been a monk long enough to have had that kind of problem to deal with, or people having that kind of experience. Then the first thing you want to do is to stop them meditating. You get them out gardening, cooking, doing things for other people, working physically, getting them physically tired, doing things that are useful for other people. So that's part of the whole Buddhist spiritual practice is not merely a matter of application of certain mindfulness techniques. And in certain cases they may not be applicable or useful for people at certain times in their life. And years ago I visited a Cambodian community in Massachusetts in America, and the abbot of the monastery there is a very well-known meditation teacher, and I visited him and asked him about his teaching of the people there. Of course these were all people, refugees from the Khmer Rouge, and many of them had lost 5, 6, 10, even 20 relatives during that period. And for them to relax and to allow all the stuff that's in the subconscious to bubble up was exactly not what they needed right now. So, he was stressing for them to be making merit, to doing wholesome things, and to social work, helping the monastery, and just settling down and leading a good moral life, and sort of creating new foundations for that kind of inner work. Anything else? Anybody at the back?
Would you have a few words on how I could cultivate discipline?
Discipline, yes. most positive with virtues that one wishes to develop, the first step is really to be reflecting, on the disadvantages, drawbacks, suffering involved in being undisciplined, both from your own experience and that of other people, and to be reflecting again and again on the values that you see in being disciplined. So creating that kind of intellectual, emotional acceptance and aspiration and interest for it. Because it really does have to be voluntary and really to come from a real, genuine commitment to it. And after that, it's a matter of relying on certain key qualities. One of them is mindfulness, and the other one is we call patient endurance or patience. And patience is one of the great unsung religious spiritual virtues these days. It's not kind of really romantic and immediately inspiring, like talking about jhanas and absorption states and bliss and all these kinds of things. But interestingly enough, the Buddha said that it is the supreme, he said, incinerator of defilements. And when I was first in northeast Thailand, we'd have to listen to discourses that would often go on for 3 hours, 4 hours at a time, and I didn't speak the language, of course. And in the Thai forest tradition, the monastic etiquette is extremely strict, and for listening to a Dhamma talk, for instance, we have to sit like this with this we call papiep. I don't know if you with one leg at the side and one leg like this, and it's strictly forbidden to sit cross-legged when you listen to a talk in the monastery there. And so I'd been sitting cross-legged for a number of years by that time, but this just feels such kind of a weird way to sit. It's kind of feels unbalanced and awkward, and so you sit like this for a while, and you're switching from one side to the other side, and it's just a real torment to sit there because you can't walk out either. You said 3 hours and 4 hours, and mosquitoes and the heat, and there's no electricity and so on, and just sitting on a concrete floor. It's no mats or anything like that. And so there were Western monks who could speak a certain amount of Thai, and I'd ask them, what he was talking about afterwards, and of course you get not very much from 3 hours, but there's this one word I'd hear again and again. Something you pick out a certain word. It's like otton, and I said, this is probably the first Thai word I ever learned. I asked him, what does this word otton mean? And he said it means patient endurance. Sort of being enduring. So this is given so much importance in monastic training. And it's not just a matter of gritting your teeth. That's not really, and just sort of sticking with it. It's a matter of being at peace with the unpleasant. Not sort of that the moment something unpleasant arises, you want to push it away as quickly as possible, because that's the natural and habitual way of dealing with unpleasant situations, people, pain, physical pain, mental pain. You just want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. But in certain conditions, cases, that might be a wise thing to do. But also to be able to develop that ability just to be very patient and say, this is miserable, but I'm willing just to be friends with it and just be willing to peacefully coexist with the unpleasant. And that is such a key virtue in just about every single area of life and spiritual life. So, question is, okay, you want to be disciplined, so that means you probably feel in certain areas of your life you're undisciplined. So the next question is, well, what are the causes and conditions? Have you ever really looked at that? What are the particular mental states, defilements, which undermine your self-discipline? Have you known in what areas, on what particular occasions, situations, have you found it particularly difficult to be disciplined? And at what times, places, with what people, and so have you found it a little bit easier, or in fact have you been much more disciplined than you would have thought? So there is a certain variation. If you're a so-called disciplined person or a so-called indisciplined person, the indisciplined person has periods of being quite disciplined, and the disciplined person has also periods where they completely lose it usually. And so rather than thinking I'm hopeless because I'm so undisciplined, I'm bad, or I'm really disciplined person, you're looking at this and the causes and conditions which sustain this particular, and then how to work with that on a daily basis. And so I'm suggesting that this being willing to develop this ability just to be with the unpleasant a little bit more, and meditation is a good way of developing that. For instance, after a certain amount of time, no matter how long you've been sitting, you're going to have some physical discomfort, whether it's a pain in your back or on your knees or something. So just as a practice, maybe just being willing to sit with physical pain a little bit more than you used to. Not to make not to say you should be able to sit through pain and sort of no matter how painful, but perhaps if you notice that you change your posture a little bit too easily, then just being willing to be with that a little bit more and consciously developing that ability to be with discomfort. And the second quality, and the one which is, as I say, directly promoted and is the heart of meditation practice, is mindfulness. Now, before any sort of full-blown emotional crisis takes place, or any really reckless kind of behavior, there is always a build-up to it. It doesn't just come out of the blue, even though it might seem that way sometimes. And the more mindful you are, the more sensitive you are to the imbalances that start to appear. Often physical changes are more easily registered than mental changes. So I would compare it with a storm. Before the rain comes down, the barometer drops, there's clouds in the sky, or it's very sticky and muggy, or whatever. There are certain kinds of changes in the weather which you know from experience. So there's a storm on the way, better get my washing in, or whatever. And as looking at your body and your mind regularly, again and again, then you begin to observe that before you say get very angry or very upset about something, very reckless or whatever, that there are certain kinds of changes taking place. Certain kind of restlessness. Maybe you feel it in your tummy, or you feel it in your calves, or you feel it in your neck or something, and this is a kind of a danger signal. But because in daily life we're so, although people in many ways are so sort of sensually oriented, they're actually surprisingly insensitive to what's going on in their bodies. And so through mindfulness you're starting to be a lot more sensitive to the small and more increasingly more subtle changes in your physical body particularly, but also in your mind, because the mind's a lot more difficult to observe in that same way, particularly if you're in a very busy kind of environment. So those are two particular areas to work on: the area of patience and the area of mindfulness. I think that also when one realizes the extent to which one's background, childhood, culture, all affect one in this way, and sometimes there can be particular views that one's adopted more or less consciously, which affect that. It's going off slightly at a tangent. I started meditating really in India when I was a teenager, and expecting all kinds of sort of weird and wonderful kind of experiences. But the thing totally surprised me. The thing that really arose as a result of the first period of meditation was this great love and respect for my parents, which had, you know, like filial piety and this kind of not really stressed in Western culture these days. And to give you a little bit, excuse me, I'll talk a little personally a little bit. I came to India the first time when I was 17, and I was here for a number of months, and then went back as far as Iran and worked for a few months to get some more money, and came back again. And this second time I really wanted to spend the time meditating, and I decided I wanted things to be done totally random. I didn't want to make any decisions. So on the outskirts of Delhi, I was hitchhiking, and I got a lift on a truck, and he said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "You just drop me wherever it suits you." So, and he dropped me in the middle of Rajasthan, and I got off the back of this truck, and somebody came up to me and said, "Where are you from? Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm looking for a place to meditate." He said, "Come with me," and so he took me to this deserted, rundown little temple, and there was this this door in this little room about the size of a bathroom really, and there was this like a swami, with long hair and a beard, just meditating, and there was just me, sort of, you know, this foreigner, Westerner, out of the blue. And so this guy said, "I brought you a disciple, Swami." And so he opened his eyes and said, "Okay," you know, and so he just pointed, "You can sleep there." So I mean, this is a wee tiny room like this, and so I moved in with him in this little room, and I ended up spending 3 months with him, and it was a wonderful experience for me. And then in the hot season, he was going up to the Himalayas, and I wanted to go with him because this was my dream, to be like a yogi in the Himalayas, you see. And he said, "No, you should go back and get the blessings of your parents." And I said, "No, like, you don't understand, Swami. I'm English. We don't do things like that in England, you know." It's very kind of, I'm 18 now. I can do what I want, you know. And he said, "No, you won't have any real spiritual progress unless you get the blessing of your family." So, and he left me. And I was heartbroken. I mean, I can really say I was heartbroken. And then I decided, well, I'm going to do this anyway. I'm going to be a yogi in the Himalayas. So I'm a sadhu. So in those days, I had less cloth than I have now. I had a couple of sarongs and a couple of waistcoats and a t-shirt and a blanket. And then I got this little saucepan. And what I do is I'd buy some rice and some dal and some salt. And every day I make a fire and put some rice and some salt and the dal in it and boil it up until it was a mush. And I eat that once a day, and that was my meal. And then I was walking around in the upper Sutlej Valley, way north of Shimla, and staying in caves and things like this. Anyway, I was eating, I was also pretty malnourished by this, because I was just, you know, eating this rice and dal mush day after day. And I was staying in this cave, and my indulgence was a cup of tea with jaggery in it. And I walked from the cave to a local village to buy some jaggery. You know what jaggery, you think? Yeah. And so I got this big lump of jaggery. It was about like that. And I put it in my bag. And I'm walking back, and it's kind of a long way, and I just take a little lump of jaggery, you know. So wow, it's just so delicious, you know. And wow, there's so much there, you know, just another little lump. Wow, it's so good, you know. And I was taking another little lump, and I couldn't stop, you know. And I come on, you know, and I had over half of this big lump like this. And then I thought, wow, yeah, it's well over half now, you know, don't make it. And I ended up eating the whole thing before I got back to the cave. like a fisherman's story. You want to make the fish bigger. I'm tempted to try and make this lump of sugar smaller because I'm embarrassed. But it was quite big, and I thought this is making a mockery of all this work I've been putting into meditation, and just the moment I get a big lump of sugar, I just completely lose it, and so I noticed that this is a pattern that unless I had some kind of firm standard, sort of fixed, objective standard, that I tend to lose it like that. If I can just have one little bit, then another little bit, then another little bit, I just can't find anywhere to stop. I can always sort of justify taking a bit more. So then I started to set myself these kinds of boundaries that I will do this, and I just sat and wrote these things down. And then I found that, I could do it, and it was a lot easier than I thought when it was something sort of written out for me and very clear that I'll only do this much and that much, or if I buy jaggery in town, I will not take any jaggery from the time I leave the shop until the time I get to my cave, or something like this. So I established these kinds of precepts for myself, and I found that I could do it, and I was much more disciplined than I thought, and it came quite naturally to me. And then I was thinking about this, and I realized just how much I owed to my father. My father was very strict with me, and I used to rage against this when I was a teenager, because he'd say, no, say, why not? Because I told you so, but, I've got all these kind of reasons, and this is, no, once he made up his mind, that was it, and you could, whatever your reasons might be, he wouldn't change. And I find it so frustrating as a teenager, you can imagine. But then, after leaving home and being by myself, I realized that's so strong in my mind is once you have that limit, that no matter how much you rage against it, you keep that limit. And particularly becoming a monk, that's just stood me in such good stead. And so I feel so grateful to my father for that. So it's a matter of your own psychology, and we all have like weak points and strong points, and so it's like a sort of a judo, and just working with what are your strong points, and what is the way of talking to yourself about something in the way that it really makes sense, rather than something you borrow from someone else, because we all have particular language that we use when we speak to ourselves, and we articulate things and we visualize things. And standing back from that a bit and trying to refine that kind of internal language we have in a way which is supporting our practice. Okay. Yes.
Thank you for talking to us. One question is I have you. What would you describe what is meditation? Sometimes I feel, do we want to clear out all the mess which is in our head, which the mind cannot clear out, which our willpower cannot clear out, our fears, our expectations? Is it something like you want to create a tabula rasa?
Yes, thank you. It's a good question. In fact, it's interesting that in the Pali language, Sanskrit language, we don't really have a word for meditation. Such, we think that would be strange. The word that we use, probably the closest word is the word bhavana, and bhavana means cultivation or development. So it's not restricted to, as I say, an application of particular mindfulness techniques, but it means it's your whole life. And so the Buddha is talking about 4 areas of cultivation, or we might easily say education or training. And the first area is your relationship to the physical world, and that's beginning with your physical body, how you treat your body, what food you put inside it, how much exercise you give it, what you do to it every day, how much rest you give it. This is, if you want to use the word meditation, this is part of, Buddhist idea of meditation, a wise, sane, intelligent relationship to your body, and then moving outwards, your relationship to the physical world closest to you, all the things that you call mine, my house, my car, my bank account, what's your relationship to all these things? And then gradually moving outwards, finally to your relationship to the environment, as a whole. So this is one area of cultivation. Second area is the cultivation of your relationship to other people, the social relationship to your family members, friends, colleagues, people in your community, in the society you live in, the country you live in the whole world. Then the third area, and this is the area which would be most closely relate to traditional ideas of meditation, is what Chitta Bhavana. And Chitta Bhavana, the training of the heart or the mind. And that means how to abandon all the negative qualities and to develop the positive qualities. So it's finding means and techniques and practices to undermine, to abandon this greed and selfishness and anger and jealousy and fear and all these things, and to develop and promote all the positive qualities of mindfulness and samadhi, inner peace, and patience and kindness and generosity, and so on and so forth. Then the fourth area would be the development of wisdom and understanding of the way things are. We're starting off from intellectual analysis and thought, and going from there to the high level we call vipassana, which is the non-verbal penetration of the way things are. Now these four areas of cultivation must be pursued in harmony. It's a holistic system. You can't just pursue one particular area and ignore the other areas or neglect them. And so the external and the internal must be in harmony. So as regards the Chitta Bhavana, or the application of particular meditation techniques, then they are supported, fortified by these external practices in relation to the physical and social world. But they also should be leading on to wisdom. So mindfulness practices and meditation has a number of benefits, both like short-term, middle-term, long-term, but ultimately, in the last analysis, its function is to provide the mind with the stability, the internal integrity and clarity and happiness, which will enable the mind to see the way things are. And it's that very profound, non-verbal insight into the mind and body which releases the mind from attachments. You see, I think all of us will recognize that we often have quite a good understanding of what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. And we also have a lot of wise thoughts in our mind. Or let's say, in a Buddhist tradition, you're constantly taught to reflect on birth, old age, sickness and death, not to repress those things or turn away from them, but to reflect on them and to make them part of your whole way of looking at things. But even if you've heard a monk or a spiritual teacher reminding you again and again that one day, sooner or later, you're going to be separated from everybody you love. Now that's not a kind of a pessimistic view of life. It's just telling the way things are. It's like that. I mean, I challenge anyone to refute that. Sooner or later you're going to be separated. Either you'll die before they do, or they die before you do. Okay, it's as short and brutal as that. But hearing that and accepting it is one thing, but dealing with the experience of bereavement is something else altogether, isn't it? So all these memories and all these wise reflections you've heard about separation and bereavement somehow just seem kind of empty and meaningless and just so much hot air when you're faced with the experience yourself of losing someone you love. So the idea of one of the ways we talk about meditation endlessly really, but one of the ways of talking about it is, as it were, to create a bridge between your mind and your heart, so that you're able to inwardly digest and integrate and assimilate these truths that you've accepted on the intellectual level. So to the point where these kinds of experiences occur, you are separated from one you love, and then the teachings and those reflections at that time are a refuge to you. So what something I often say in Thailand is we're so intelligent, at every time except when we're stupid, So we know it all. We've got it all worked out, except for when we really need it, when something bad happens, and then we forget it all. And then when the crisis is over, and perhaps we've acted in, then we remember all over again. So and so this I think is an important challenge. How can we take this knowledge that we have, this wisdom that we have, and make it part of ourselves to the extent that it's right there with us when we really need it. And I think that meditation is the practical means by which you can do that. Is that clear? Yeah? Anybody else have? Okay. So one more question before your lunchtime?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Meditation is something that you've been telling that we have to look inside ourselves and practice mindfulness. Whereas the rest of my life, everybody's life over here, we go out and the message or the performance that is demanded from us in the modern world is the exact opposite. That is, all the time you are asked to look outside and attach yourself to all kinds of forms. So how does one manage 1 hour of meditation and whatever 12 hours of the opposite?
Well, first of all, be a revolutionary. Don't buy into all that. So kind of one piece of advice. Secondly, I don't think that, when we talk about the modern world and the capitalist system and competition and the cutthroat nature of modern life and the rat race and everything, that it's really quite so kind of monolithic and sort of fixed in stone as all that. I think that that there's a lot of variation and that it's not just you or not just me. People that are very that see the faults of and are worried by some aspects of modern life and modern culture. And I think that we have to recognize that not only are we molded by and conditioned to a certain extent by the values and mores of the society in which we live in, but we also have a part in contributing towards them or even to change them in certain aspects. So the capitalist system itself is not it's not just this one fixed thing, and the capitalist system as it's practiced in America and Britain is noticeably different than kind of forms that you find in Europe, for instance. And there are certain sort of, in terms of fine-tuning, if you like, there are a number of differences. And so I think it's more a matter of finding like-minded people and within the large system, as it were, to create sort of microclimates, if you like, which are based on more humane and wise principles. And certainly in India, this is not a materialistic culture exclusively. Perhaps it is a lot more, but there is in India, and sometimes it is only a conceit, but I think it's quite a good conceit that India is a spiritual country, and that's something that many people in this country are proud of, even if they don't know what it really means. But it's something that's a real resource for a hope for this country, and that I think that one of the things that must be said for this form of social organization, as compared with how the world used to be 100 years ago or 200 years ago, or how it's been in communist countries not so long ago, is that there is, at least for people with a certain level of education and of a certain social class, there is a lot more flexibility and opportunity of choice of livelihood and choice of environment. That this would be unthinkable before industrialization or before modern change, that as a woman that you could choose a career, that you could choose not to get married if you wanted to, and it wouldn't be a major big deal. You could choose whether or not you want to have children, and if you, as I say, if you have a certain level of education, income, you maybe choose to take a lower paid job that you find more fulfilling and more in line with your ideals, and a higher paid job which you feel you would have to compromise on your ideals. So there is within this, as you say, this kind of modern day world which is encouraging you to go outwards, and is very sort of gross and coarse in many aspects, and which is stimulating a lot of the more unwholesome qualities in people's minds. Even so, there are opportunities for people to mediate or to lessen the impact of that, at least on the individual or with groups of like-minded people and family, and so you can influence yourself and the people in a small area around you, and just do what you can do. But I think that there are many possibilities to live a life, an ethical, moral life, and to contribute to one degree or another to the society in which you live in a way that you can feel proud of afterwards. Because this is really it. You want to be able to, you need to, of course, to be able to sustain yourself financially and to be financially comfortable. But on top of that, you want to have a lifestyle and a way of living that yeah, I'm proud of that. There's something that, if you have children or grandchildren, that you say, yes, I could tell my grandchildren what I did when I was working, and feel proud of that, and something that I would like to pass on to a grandchild. That's one kind of criteria that you could choose. So it's break time, and time for you to have some lunch. So please feel free. Where is lunch? So lunch is over there. I'm going to be around. If anybody would like to speak with me, then they may do so. We Buddhist monks, we just eat one meal a day, so I don't have anything till tomorrow morning. So pardon? 5 more, yeah. Actually, you can make an hour so late. So it's just after 12, so an hour break, and then come back in an hour.